Lord of Mysteries. My Identities echoes across time chapter 491 to 500. While Russell was giving the Augustus family a Black Emperor surprise, Bernadette successfully interrupted Mr. A's summoning ritual. Of course, because Lynn had given a prior warning, Bernadette didn't do anything to Mr. A and his group. She merely kicked them out and then smoothly completed her advancement to Sage in her safe house. This time, without the interference of the hidden Sage, Bernadette's advancement went even more smoothly than in the original timeline. It wasn't long before she opened her eyes and regained her human form from her state as an information creature. Finally, Sequence 2. Bernadette exhaled and couldn't help but smile. Now she could better help her father. Meanwhile, in a certain treasury of the Augustus family. This conqueror characteristic is yours. Isn't this Truncest's favorite music box? I remember it was a gift from his wife. How did it end up in the hands of the Augustus family? Lynn, as if in an unguarded realm, was rummaging through a pile of items. Medici was standing beside him as a lookout. Medici, who had just been given a conqueror's characteristic, held the box containing the characteristic while watching Lynn search through the pile of clutter with great interest. Medici then curled his lips in disdain and, as if remembering something, said, "Aren't you about to advance to Demon of Knowledge?" Huh. Yeah, why? Lynn paused, nodded, and looked at Medici. Will you leave? After a moment of eye contact, Medici shifted his gaze away and asked. I'll probably be gone for a while, but as long as you remember me, I'll return, Lynn laughed. He set down the music box and said to Medici, What, you'll miss me? Who'd miss you? I'm just worried you'll die out there and leave me and the Lord to clean up your mess, Medici said in his usual snarky tone. Yes, of course, you wouldn't miss me, Lynn responded in a tone of understanding. Before Medici could retort, he added, but I'll miss you guys. Medici, about to speak again, suddenly fell silent. But I'll return, and it won't be long, Lynn continued, patting Medici on the head. Don't miss me too much. Ha. Medici sneered and swatted Lynn's hand away, leaning back like a lord, looking at Lynn and saying, if you don't come back, don't expect me to take care of your chaotic group of friends. No problem, I'll have them take care of you. After all, you're still a baby. Lynn said seriously. Medici clenched his fists. Alright, I'm done picking things. Let's go pick up Klein. He should have dealt with the despair witch by now. Lynn said with a grin, before Medici could lose his temper. For the Augustus family, today was undoubtedly their unluckiest day. Not only did all their schemes collapse, but they also had to face the reckoning of several major churches. It would take great effort to placate the returning Russell. The only silver lining was that, considering the stability and order of the Loan Kingdom, the Augustus family didn't suffer the same fate as the Truncest royal family. Though they would decline, they would still survive. For the witch sect, today was a disaster. They lost Trissa, the important sealed artifact on her, and even the despair witch sent to cooperate with the Loan royal family vanished. As for the conqueror's characteristic, it was nowhere to be found. For the ordinary citizens of Backland, today was an ordinary yet joyful day as they welcomed the new year, looking forward to a brighter future. For the church members, today was a busy day. They had to deal with various matters, leaving them no time to eat, let alone celebrate the new year. As for Lynn, today was undoubtedly a happy day. He watched the show he wanted, ate the melon he craved, and even looted a treasury of the Augustus royal family. It was a day of harvest. Thinking about it, given your personality you'd have totally crushed the Augustus family, Russell commented as he made dumplings in the Sherlock Detective Agency. I didn't expect you to let them go. Would you be the one to maintain the order of the Loan Kingdom if I crushed them? Lynn gave Russell a sideways glance while also making dumplings. He had wanted to crush the Augustus family, but for one, there were innocent members like Prince Edisic. Second, the Augustus family wasn't weak. If war broke out, they would win, but innocent people would be caught in the crossfire. Third, Lynn had to consider others' opinions. In the mysterious world, while the Augustus family's actions were excessive, there wasn't a single god who didn't have blood on their hands. Crushing the Augustus family might be satisfying in the moment, but it would also make others wary. Lastly, Lynn had to think about the stability of the Loan Kingdom. While the Augustus family might not match the major churches in high-end power, they had maintained the stability of this land for over 1,000 years. If Lynn wiped them out, the country could face rebellion or even invasion from other nations, and it would be the ordinary citizens who suffered. For all these reasons, Lynn had given the Augustus family a hard blow but had no intention of wiping them out. As long as they stopped plotting and ruled their kingdom properly, he would leave them be. After all, Lynn was quite busy himself. Wait, what did you just put in that dumpling? Lynn, in the middle of making dumplings, suddenly paused and looked at Medici with sharp eyes. Medici continued making his dumplings without changing his expression, but the faint red visible through the dumpling skin revealed that he had wrapped chili peppers inside. At least it's not strawberries, Lynn sighed in relief. Then his expression changed as he grabbed Ouroboros' wrist and said with a strange look, "Why are you putting chocolate inside? Is that not allowed?" Ouroboros asked, puzzled. Of course not. Chocolate dumplings are absolutely forbidden. Lynn shook his head emphatically. However, Russell chimed in with a grin, "I'm curious what chocolate-filled dumplings would taste like." End of chapter. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. How about I make you a plate of chocolate mapo tofu tomorrow? Lynn shot a look at him and uttered those terrifying words. Ah, that sounds terrifying. Russell imagined the scene and shook his head. Chocolate dumplings, he was willing to try, but chocolate mapo tofu. He had to decline. Even as part of dark cuisine, that's too much. Klein, who was also wrapping dumplings, couldn't help but comment. As a Chinese, he clearly had certain principles. And you dare to talk. Don't prepare ketchup then. Dumplings with ketchup. How did you even think of that? Lynn glanced at Mr. Fool with equal disdain. Ahem, I just wanted to try it out. Klein coughed awkwardly. Normally, he would use chili sauce, but today, seeing everyone making such bizarre dumplings, he had a peculiar urge to experiment. You might as well dip it in wasabi. Lynn said as he finished wrapping his dumpling. Looking at the strange shapes and fillings around him, he shook his head. Whatever, let's boil them all together. Whoever eats what, it's just bad luck. That's right. After wrapping up the Augustus family conspiracy, the group decided to gather and make dumplings to celebrate the new year. But as the scene unfolded, the variety of dumpling fillings had gone out of control. Not just the usual cabbage, chives, and beef, but also chili, garlic, cheese, and other random ingredients. Lynn didn't dare to imagine what this pot of dumplings would taste like once boiled. Moreover, Lynn's gaze landed on Adam, who was pouring alcohol into the dumpling filling, and he rubbed his temples. Let them mess around, but why are you following along? Just thought it would be fun. Adam smiled, not stopping his actions. Alright, fine. Everyone has to eat these dumplings. Anyone who doesn't will face my wrath. Lynn rolled his eyes and stealthily stuffed a piece of raw ginger into one dumpling. Since no one was taking this seriously, he had decided to play along. If they all suffered, so be it. You're so wicked. Russell gasped dramatically, pointing at the ginger-filled dumpling in Lynn's hand. Sorry, that's just who I am, Lynn replied without lifting an eyelid. Fine, you started it. Russell, looking determined, grabbed a handful of Sichuan pepper and stuffed it into a dumpling. Everyone's eyebrows twitched, but no one stopped. Instead, they began adding even stranger things into their dumplings. And thus began the chaotic competition. After Lynn finished wrapping the dumplings and put them in the pot, the water turned murky, resembling a thick soup. Without a change in expression, he served them out, placing 10 dumplings in each person's bowl. Each dumpling was enchanted with a secret ability, making it impossible to tell the filling until after it was eaten. Go ahead, don't be shy. Lynn sat at his seat, looking at the hesitant group, a fake smile on his face. Oh. Ouroboros was the first to respond. He clumsily picked up a dumpling, dipped it in the sauce, and put it in his mouth, his expression remaining calm. Brother, what's inside? Russell leaned over and asked quietly. Seems like beef. Ouroboros thought for a moment, unsure. Amazing, such luck. Russell gave a thumbs up. Meanwhile, Bernadette, who had been quietly watching, picked up a dumpling and took a bite. Her brows furrowed instinctively. Yikes, Bernadette, don't eat that. I'll take it. Russell gasped upon seeing the dumpling filled with Sichuan pepper. He hadn't expected Bernadette to be the first unlucky one. It's fine. Bernadette shook her head, resolutely chewing the rest of the dumpling, though her expression grew increasingly awkward. Mind your own business, worry about yourself. Lynn remarked as he too ate a dumpling, chewing without a flinch. Chili filling, not bad. Lynn never feared spicy food. Ah, ginger. Next to him, Klein wasn't so lucky, grimacing as he chewed the ginger-filled dumpling. Hey. Medici chuckled coldly, swallowing a dumpling with no reaction, though it probably had wasabi inside. Adam, from his perch, picked up a dumpling and took a bite, detecting a faint alcohol taste. Yes, it was the one he'd spiked with strong liquor. One by one, the group subjected each other to odd flavors, eating the strange dumplings without complaint. As the last dumpling was swallowed, the clock struck midnight. Dong, 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 the church bells rang from afar, accompanied by fireworks lighting up the sky. Lynn set down his chopsticks and looked at the fireworks outside the window, then back at the group, all displaying subtle, pained expressions. Some were even holding their stomachs. He laughed and raised his glass, filled with alcohol, smiling brightly. Happy New Year! Happy New Year! Klein responded first, though he couldn't help but smile wryly. I don't think I'll want dumplings for months. Mr. Fool's luck wasn't great. 8 out of his 10 dumplings had unusual fillings. Happy New Year! Ouroboros followed. I thought the dumplings were pretty good. As the lucky one, Ouroboros had mostly gotten the normal dumplings Lynn had wrapped at the start, so he hadn't suffered much. Happy New Year! Bernadette said, clutching her cheek. Nothing serious, just a bit too numb. Happy New Year, though it feels like I'm speaking through holes. Russell inhaled sharply, feeling cold all over. His dumplings were either wasabi or mint, and now his brain felt as though it were ventilated. Happy New Year! Look at you all, so weak. Medici laughed mockingly. Although he had also eaten many bizarre dumplings, his pride wouldn't let him admit defeat. Happy New Year! Adam chimed in last, looking at Lynn as if deep in thought. All right then, cheers. Clink, the sound of 7 glasses colliding rang out, the warm light shining on them, reflecting everyone's smiling faces. No matter what the future held, at this moment, everyone was happy. End of chapter. While everyone on Earth was joyfully celebrating the new year, Mr. Door was in his cozy little house, hanging on the barrier amidst the stars. Are you really planning to leave your mark across the cosmos now and start your ascension journey? You know, once this ritual starts, there's no turning back. Lynn, wearing his divine avatar mask, looked seriously at Bethel and asked. Even though he hadn't prayed to his true self for knowledge on this, Lynn had studied the information Bethel shared after deciding to ascend. He confirmed one thing: the ascension was irreversible. Once Bethel became the avatar of space in this world, there would be no going back. Moreover, the ascension ritual wasn't guaranteed to succeed. If it failed, the consequences would be far worse than simply failing to advance through potion consumption. I've thought it through, Bethel said calmly, even smiling a little. Let me go home. I might have missed the new year, but it's not too late. Fine. Lynn stared at him for a few seconds, confirming that Bethel had no intention of backing out. He then grumbled and pouted. Lynn extended his hand towards Bethel, smiling once more. Then let's get started. I was hoping to get a bit closer to some of the outer gods in the stars. Lynn's emphasis on the last 2 words made it clear the statement could be translated as, I'm itching for a fight. If any outer god dares to get in my way, I'll knock them out. Thank you, though I doubt those guys would approach you willingly. Bethel shook Lynn's hand, his expression becoming wry as he thought of the outer gods who had been avoiding his cozy house like the plague. Isn't that a good thing? Lynn chuckled, and the two disappeared from the small house, reappearing on the moon. The moon's surface was still a bloody red. However, the mother goddess of depravity, which had been lingering there moments ago, disappeared like it had seen something filthy, vanishing before Lynn could even greet it. Hey, don't run. We can at least talk. I'm not necessarily going to beat you up. Lynn reached out towards where the goddess of depravity had fled, but before he could finish shouting, the figure had completely disappeared. Mother goddess of depravity, I don't believe you. I just suffered at your hands. You think I'm that easy to fool. I may be crazy, but I'm not stupid. Bethel couldn't help but laugh. Even though he expected this, seeing it in person still filled Mr. Door with joy. It was a feeling of schadenfreude, serves you right. Despite his amusement, Mr. Door quickly returned to the task at hand, setting up the ritual on the moon. Lynn floated nearby, watching Bethel prepare. Ignoring the fact that they were on the moon, amidst a grotesque blood-soaked hellscape, the scene was almost peaceful. Alright, let's move to the next place. Bethel said after completing the first step of the ritual and leaving his mark on the moon. No problem. Lynn gave an okay hand sign. Anyone lucky enough to glimpse the stars that day would have witnessed an unbelievable sight, outer gods fleeing from a golden-haired youth as if avoiding a plague. Meanwhile, the youth's refined, handsome companion slowly left marks on each star occupied by the outer gods, with laughter echoing throughout the cosmos. So, you're the circle of inevitability. You don't seem as imposing as the mother goddess of depravity. Hey, don't run. You're the main villain of the second book. Mr. Primordial Hunger, could I borrow 2 minutes of your time to introduce? He's gone. Let me see, a high-dimensional overseer, huh? Sorry to disturb you, but why are you called that? Could it be that you are a reader transm? Tisk, ran off again. Sigh, I feel like I could write a book titled, How to Deal with Being Unpopular. Lynn grumbled as he sat down on a patch of air, muttering to himself. As he spoke, he kept an eye on Bethel. The latter's expression had never been more serious, and his hands worked meticulously on the final step of the ritual. When Bethel etched the last mystical symbol, Lynn saw him transform into light. At that moment, the individual known as Bethel seemed to vanish, dispersing into countless radiant particles. Perhaps calling them particles of light wasn't accurate, describing them as manifestations of space laws was more fitting. Should be fine. Lynn's heart clenched as he watched the dispersed spatial laws, his fingers twitching slightly. Maybe he could help Bethel. His instincts told him that it wouldn't be difficult. Although he hadn't inherited much of his true self's spatial power, the uniqueness of his origin still enabled him to do many things. But, no. This is something Bethel must do on his own. Lynn quickly suppressed his impulse. He could, of course, help Bethel reassemble, but it would be like helping a butterfly break out of its cocoon, leaving lasting aftereffects. Some things have to be accomplished on one's own. Time ticked by, maybe 10 minutes, maybe longer. Finally, Lynn noticed the laws manifesting as particles of light starting to move. The once faintly glowing particles suddenly brightened, and then, as if painting a picture, they began to form Bethel's shape in the starry sky, gradually solidifying into a figure indistinguishable from a regular person. Bethel opened his eyes. In those gem-like eyes, countless mystical symbols seemed to flicker, each representing the spatial truths of the universe. A normal person would be overwhelmed just by a single glance. When the symbols finally faded, the familiar look of Bethel, Mr. Door, returned to his eyes. Bethel exhaled and then looked at Lynn, as if examining him. A few seconds later, he said, "So that's how it is. What, can you see my true form now?" Lynn grinned, knowing from Bethel's expression that the ascension had succeeded. "I can see a bit of the truth, but I still can't fully perceive the vast presence behind you, that one." Bethel paused, carefully choosing his words before continuing. "I can feel that they harbor no malice toward you or this world, but they're so great that even their harmless attention is more than this fragile world can bear." End of chapter. So, I'll resolve everything outside this world, Lynn said, not surprised that Bethel could see through it. He smiled as he spoke. Bethel's expression turned complex when he heard this. He looked at Lynn seriously and said, "I will remember your existence and wait for your return." Besides, Bethel furrowed his brow, looking at Lynn with some hesitation but eventually said, "I seem to have seen some dark shadows, I'm not sure what they are. Please, be careful." Don't worry about it, just something expected." Lynn blinked, not dwelling on the subject with Bethel. Instead, he smiled and extended his hand. "So, shall we go home, Bethel? Do you need me to give you a lift? Maybe you can introduce me to the current Abraham family," Bethel replied, seeing Lynn had it under control. He didn't press the previous topic further. "You've stumped me there. I'm not that familiar with the Abrahams. But do you remember that slacker I introduced to you before? Not the loaf, I mean Miss Furs. She's doing pretty well with the Abrahams. I can introduce her to you." Lynn openly admitted to slacking off and threw Furs under the bus as a tool. While Klein and Lynn were traveling across the 5 seas during Russell's time, Furs had already reported to the Abraham family. Though her sequence was not high, she managed well under the title of a divine envoy, handling the Abraham family's affairs effectively. The girl who likes writing, right? Perhaps I should take in a student. Bethel smiled, seemingly recalling something. Lynn raised his eyebrows and said, she's indeed a good student. Meanwhile, Furs, who was furiously writing in her bedroom at the new Abraham family base, suddenly sensed someone entering her room. She jumped up and looked at the visitor, only to freeze. Why, Your Highness, why are you here? Furs stammered. She had seen the Angel of Secrets before, as he often came by to chat about shocking gossip over the past 2 months, more precisely, to tell her tales like the tragic love story between the Night Emperor and the Queen of Blood Moon, or the much-scorned life of the eternal blazing sun, all while urging her to write them into novels. Honestly, at first, Furs had trembled while listening to these stories, fearing that the subjects of the gossip would come after her. But after hearing them so often, Furs had grown numb. Coupled with the Abraham family's proud tradition, she even started turning those stories into novels without flinching. The manuscript she was rushing through was a customized piece the Angel of Secrets had recently requested, themed around the story of Emperor Tudor, surrounded by traitors. Don't be nervous. I'm just here to see you and introduce you to a teacher. Lynn smiled warmly and waved his hand. Then, under Fur's puzzled expression, he pulled Bethel in front of her and introduced him. This is Bethel Abraham, the former patriarch of the Abraham family, one of the most powerful beings closest to divinity in the fourth epic. He chose to guard this world as Mr. Door. Furs was stunned. She stared at the graceful, handsome man in front of her, her pen falling to the ground as she stammered, Mr. Door. You're Mr. Door. But weren't you? How? She clearly had many questions, but she didn't know where to start. Sorry for the trouble you've been through, Bethel apologized with a soft smile as he looked at the flustered Furs. Then, he asked, would you like to become my student? Student. How did things fast forward to becoming a student? Oh, right, he did mention a teacher. Fur's mind was still in a daze, but her reflexes were faster than her brain. She blurted out, I would. It sounded almost like a marriage proposal acceptance. PFFT, Lynn couldn't help but laugh at the scene. He heard a commotion outside, as if other members of the Abraham family had noticed something unusual and were on their way. A few seconds later, there was a knock on Fur's door, and the voice of Dorian came from outside, Furs, may I come in? Unlike in the original story, since Furs had joined the Abraham family as a favored servant of the Fool, she hadn't become Dorian's student. However, the elder of the Abraham family still cared for her greatly, and their relationship wasn't much different from the original. Still riding the wave of joy, Furs instinctively looked at Lynn. Come in. Lynn gave her a reassuring glance and answered Dorian through the door. Hearing the familiar voice, Dorian clearly sighed in relief. He opened the door and saw the 3 people inside. 2 of them were familiar, but the third was a stranger. No, not quite. Dorian's eyes widened as he stared at Bethel. His mind flashed back to the portraits of his ancestors he had seen. After repeatedly comparing and confirming, his lips trembled, and his voice cracked with emotion. Why you are. Thank you for all your hard work over the years. Bethel sighed, stepping forward to gently pat Dorian on the head. With a warm smile, he said, I'm back. Lord. You've finally returned. Dorian's voice choked with tears. The middle-aged man, who had never shed a tear even in the most difficult times, wept like a child, filled with both grievance and joy. Finally, the Abraham family could escape their cursed fate. Finally, they could regain their glory. This is wonderful. Just wonderful. Guess it's a happy ending, Lynn couldn't help but comment as he watched the touching reunion. Not wanting to disturb Bethel and his beloved descendants, Lynn quietly left the room and stretched. Only Medici and Saussure left, Lynn murmured to himself, then smiled. But before fishing out those 2, I might as well take a trip to modern era. He had already deciphered the coordinates of the pre-epic. Tomorrow, he would take everyone on a team-building trip to the pre-epic and secretly smuggle their relatives and friends to Saphira Castle, where they could wake up in this era. Too bad the knowledge more hasn't split yet. Otherwise, we could have used it for transportation. Lynn shook his head regretfully and continued to remotely observe the Abraham family's heartwarming reunion. Ah, not bad at all. End of chapter. Today, we are gathered here to celebrate our good friend Russell's birthday. Let's hope in the coming days he can continue to rot away with us. The next day, at the Sherlock Detective Agency, Lynn stood in front of the coffee table, holding a small triangular red flag and a plastic horn in his hand, looking like a proper tour guide as he solemnly spoke. I get everything you're saying, but why am I the one rotting away? Shouldn't it be Klein? Russell grumbled, unimpressed. As a person of great wit, he naturally understood what Lynn was playing at. It's called, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Besides, this phrase was said by you. Lynn grinned, managing to play another joke. There is a saying between transmigrators, when you don't know who said a quote, it must have been Russell. TCH. Russell clicked his tongue but didn't pursue the matter further. Instead, he asked, when is the Evernight goddess arriving? We've been waiting for almost half an hour now. If she isn't planning on coming, should we just leave? His tone was filled with anticipation by the end of his sentence. It wasn't surprising that Russell was so excited. The reason for their gathering was that Lynn had deciphered the coordinates of the pre-epic, and they could now embark on a journey to that time. In addition to this, the Angel of Secrets was going to smuggle their friends and family to Saphira Castle, allowing them to transmigrate to the current era. How could Russell not be thrilled? Why are you in such a rush? She made a deal with me long before you. If we're counting, you were the last one to join. Lynn rolled his eyes and retorted. And you still have the nerve to bring that up. I haven't even called you out for pretending to be from the Time-Space Bureau when I first crossed over. Russell snapped. He had recently recovered some memories from the time he had just crossed over and been tricked by Lynn. It's really despicable for a seasoned transmigrator to deceive a newbie. Lynn chuckled and looked at Russell. Are you sure I was tricking you? Silly child, have you forgotten that I'm not from this world either? Guess which world this is for me? Russell's previously proud demeanor instantly faltered. He had indeed suspected that Lynn wasn't from this world, possibly a true transmigrator. The main reason was that Russell was sure that whatever lurked behind Lynn couldn't possibly originate from this world. Even the so-called original creator couldn't compare to the billions of lights shining behind Lynn. Coupled with his completely different abilities from the gods of this world, Russell had long since deduced his transmigrator status. In fact, it wasn't just Russell. Medici, Saussure, and the recently elevated Bethel had all noticed Lynn's otherworldly nature. Even Klein, after their conversation in Foggy Town, had come to a realization. However, no one cared much about this truth. In a world as crazy and chaotic as theirs, whether someone was an outsider was irrelevant. To Medici, Klein, and the others, as long as Lynn remained the same person they knew, it didn't matter where he came from. For Russell, it was the same. He didn't care if Lynn was a transmigrator. As long as Lynn had saved him and could help him bring back his family, that was enough. However, Lynn's words had sparked some doubt in Russell, who looked at him suspiciously and asked, You're not really from the Time-Space Bureau, are you? Lynn didn't answer but simply smiled. What are you two talking about? At that moment, Klein's voice echoed through the room. The surrounding light seemed to distort as Klein's figure emerged from thin air. Along with him was a figure cloaked in a hood, revealing only a delicate and feminine face. It was none other than the vessel of the Evernight goddess, the former mother of the sky, sister to Antigonus, and now, the Evernight Church's Grade 0 sealed artifact, 0 to 17, also known as the Erasing Angel. The consciousness driving this vessel was, of course, the Evernight goddess herself, Amonizes. Like other gods who had used their divine kingdoms to block the cracks in reality, Amonizes could not descend into this era in her true form. She had no choice but to channel a part of her consciousness into a divine vessel to travel to the modern era in this manner. This was why the Evernight goddess had arrived late. Activating a sealed artifact took time. And as a humble Nighthawk, Klein naturally had to escort his superior, which was why he appeared alongside the Evernight goddess. Nothing much, just some interesting stuff, Lynn smiled, then turned to the figure of 0 to 17 beside Klein, curiously asking, Are you the Evernight goddess? Hello, Lynn. You can just call me Amonizes, the Evernight goddess said warmly, with no hint of arrogance. Alright, Amonizes. Now, we're just waiting for the last two guests. Lynn smoothly changed his form of address. Before he could finish his sentence, he noticed that in the corner of the room, Adam had appeared out of nowhere, while the Angel of Secrets sat smiling on the couch, leisurely sipping tea. Well, it seems our last guests have arrived. I now declare the modern era travel group officially established. Lynn clapped his hands, and with a flick of his wrist, a bunch of badges appeared as if by magic. He distributed them to everyone in the room. These are the group badges. Please take good care of them. The destination is quite far from our current time, and there may be some deviations upon arrival. There are also certain risks in traveling through time, so I urge you to keep these badges on you. They will ensure that even if you get separated from your guide, you can safely return to this era, Lynn explained, sounding like a serious tour guide despite the bizarre content of his speech. If everything goes well, we should arrive about 3 months before the awakening. The trip will last 3 months, during which you can move freely. Just remember to report your location and movements to the guide daily, Lynn continued, his unhurried tone soothing to listen to. End of chapter. The tour guide, kindly reminds you not to try to change history because whatever you do won't affect the final outcome. You might even disrupt my and the Angel of Secrets mission to rescue people. Lynn paused for a moment as if remembering something and turned to Klein, saying, by the way, make sure you digest as much of the Bizarro Sorcerer potion as possible during this time. It would be best if you could finish it all at once. That way, you can immediately take the scholar of your potion and advance. After all, your ritual is essentially complete. I'll do my best, Klein nodded. Though he was very excited about reuniting with his family and friends from the past era, he hadn't forgotten the mission. Alright, everyone, get ready. 3, 2, 1, go. Joe Mingrui felt like he might be seeing things. Otherwise, how could he have woken up to find a whole group of people in his room? Who are you? Joe asked cautiously, already gripping the phone under his pillow and secretly dialing. Am I still dreaming? A thought suddenly flashed through Joe's mind. It was abrupt but strangely convincing, and in the next second, the surprise and confusion on his face were replaced by drowsiness. Thud, he just lay back down on the bed again. Ha ha ha, little Joe, this must be the old you, right? You look so young, or you just a few years out of school. Russell couldn't help but laugh aloud, though his laughter carried a touch of excitement. He's back. Really back. Even though Russell had mentally prepared for this, he still found it hard to contain his emotions at this moment. I'll be sure to tell Bernadette that all of her father's great works were plagiarized, Klein said casually, instantly cutting off Russell's laughter. Hey, you can't, Klein, you're definitely picking up bad habits from Lynn. Russell's voice carried a strange tone of sadness. Hey, Klein chuckled softly as he walked over to Joe. He stared at his past self, who had fallen back asleep under the influence of Beyonder powers, his expression dazed for a few seconds. Then Klein sighed and carefully pulled the phone from Joe Mingrui's hand. He unlocked it expertly and opened a certain app, finding his mother's account. Klein pressed his lips together. His body abruptly shifted, and within seconds, he became an exact copy of Joe lying in bed. Yet, he hesitated, staring quietly at his mother's profile picture, unable to press down on the screen. It was hard to say what Klein felt in that moment, excitement, fear, or perhaps something even more complex. This mixture of emotions made Klein's hand tremble with anticipation, but he still couldn't bring himself to tap on his mother's profile to send a message. What's the matter? Afraid to face home. Someone sidled up next to him, and before Klein could stop them, Lynn swiftly tapped on his mother's profile and started a video call. No, Klein's words of protest were too late. The call connected, and his mother's face appeared on the screen. She seemed to be hanging clothes, and from the camera angle, Klein could just make out the clothesline behind her. What's wrong, Mingrui? Why are you calling so early in the morning? Did something happen? His mother's voice came through the phone, her tone filled with unrestrained concern and worry. Nothing, Mom. I just suddenly missed you, Klein blurted out instinctively before his brain could even register the words. Then he saw his mother on the screen smile. Oh, you, calling so early. She seemed taken aback by the direct sentiment, a little embarrassed, but her eyes lit up with joy. After scolding him playfully for a moment, she noticed Klein's somber expression and quickly changed her tone. But I miss you too. By the way, you're not wearing much, be careful not to catch a cold. It's getting chilly. Once she started talking, she didn't stop. His mother rambled on, and Klein listened quietly to those familiar words. Words he had once found mundane now made his nose sting with emotion. If it weren't for the clown ability helping him keep his composure, Klein might have cried. Shish, let's give him some space. Lynn lowered his voice and signaled the others to leave. They filed out of the room, giving Klein a moment alone to reconnect with his family. I'm not exactly sure where your families are, so I won't be the one to lead you to reunite with them. I'll leave that part to you. Take some time to catch up with your loved ones and maybe visit some close friends as well, Lynn said, looking around at the group with a smile. The Angel of Secrets then produced a pile of crystalline candies and handed them out. These candies can be given to the people you want to save. After they take one, I'll be able to locate them and smuggle them into Saphira Castle. They can also protect their souls from the mystery's influence to a certain extent. Each of you can choose up to 10 people to save, but any more than that, and there might be problems. The choice is yours. Thank you. Even Russell offered sincere gratitude at that moment. He clutched the candies tightly, knowing they were a rare item from the Wheel of Fortune pathway. He glanced at the others and said, I will go off first. See you all later. Collaborating with you might have been the best decision I've ever made, Amon said, casting a deep look at Lynn. And I truly hope that you come back safely. With those words, she vanished, as if erased from the air. Adam, on the other hand, examined the candy thoughtfully before storing it. He turned to Lynn and said, I do not regret what I did to Medici. It was a necessary sacrifice. Lynn looked at him, waiting for more. It's the same for me, Adam continued in his usual mild manner, smiling at Lynn. If the sorcerer awakens, I wouldn't mind letting him take control. Necessary sacrifices, even if it meant sacrificing himself. Adam had always been prepared for this. Lynn paused, studying the blonde priest in front of him as if seeing him in a new light. Finally, he said, You'd better mean what you say. You can supervise me personally, Adam replied with a smile, before disappearing into thin air, just as he'd come. That, Lynn gritted his teeth and glanced at the Angel of Secrets beside him, who, playing along, asked with a smile, Do you think he means it? Of course, the Angel of Secrets chuckled, looking in the direction Adam had left. It has to be true, even if, hey, I'll make sure it is. End of chapter. While everyone else went home to reunite with their families, Lynn, the real transmigrator, decided to take advantage of the situation and explore the remnants of the modern era while searching for the traces of Saphira Castle aka the Door of Light. Indeed, Beyonders existed even before the initial awakening. Some were even the handiwork of the Lord of Mysteries. In the dimly lit room, Lynn held a slightly aged copper coin and couldn't help but smile. Behind him lay an unconscious young man. The young man wasn't particularly special, just a sequence 9 seer. Though the potion formulas might change with the times, the characteristics remained the same, just like those gods from the second epic. The young man had been lucky, inadvertently contacting a Beyonder characteristic, and didn't lose control and turned into a monster, but rather becoming a fortunate Beyonder. Lynn paid attention to the young man not only because of his status as a Beyonder but also because he sensed a faint aura of the Lord of Mysteries from him. The carrier of this aura was the copper coin Lynn was now holding. Clearly, this man was one of the lucky individuals chosen by the Lord of Mysteries. When the initial awakening occurred, he would probably be pulled into the Door of Light, becoming part of the Cocoon Division, only to wake up countless years later when Klein relinquished Saphira Castle. In a way, he's also a child of destiny. Lynn mused as the copper coin in his hand was silently devoured and deconstructed by invisible bubbles, which then returned to him, making him smile brightly. I've found you. The next moment, Lynn's figure faded away as if he had never been there. The copper coin reappeared in the unconscious young man's pocket, looking just as it had before. Above the boundless gray fog, a new, unexpected guest arrived. Having visited Saphira Castle nearly every week, Lynn was first met by the familiar sense of rejection and danger from the castle itself. As one of the original Sephiroths, the Door of Light was certainly no harmless entity. Klein only managed to accommodate this poisonous yet sweet existence due to his inherent advantage. It allowed the members of the Tarot Club to briefly remain in the castle under the Fool's protection. But at this point in time, with Saphira Castle not yet belonging to Klein, it was far less gentle. Upon detecting an intruder, a vast expanse of gray fog surged toward Lynn, carrying the unique corruption of the castle. Ah, how enthusiastic! Lynn chuckled. The next second, his body seemed to dissolve into countless layers of bubbles, only to return to normal in an instant. The previously aggressive gray fog immediately quieted down, becoming as docile and safe as it had been when under Klein's control. Looks like the Lord of Mysteries hasn't fully awakened yet, or perhaps he hasn't been split off. Lynn wasn't surprised by Saphira Castle's reaction. Just as Amon and Klein could deceive the castle using the reviving will of the Lord of Mysteries within them to gain control, Lynn, sharing the same origin as the Lord of Mysteries, could achieve the same. However, Lynn had no intention of using this deception to control the castle. Trying to accommodate this would be akin to, hey, courting death. So, he only borrowed the deception to ensure that when the Lord of Mysteries pulled people in, he could smuggle Klein's friends and family into the castle as well. After setting up precautions to guarantee their safety, he promptly left the dangerous hot potato, afraid he might accidentally consume Saphira Castle himself. With that, the main goal of this trip is half accomplished. Lynn stretched lazily and pulled out his phone. As expected, the most popular notification was about the eerie live stream that had been causing a stir recently. Lynn opened the stream and saw that the current live stream was of a supernatural host exploring an abandoned hospital. By the way, the host's name was Dwayne. Yes, this strange live stream was orchestrated by Klein to help digest the Bizarro sorcerer potion. As a demigod with the assistance of Russell, the once Emperor of Knowledge, setting up a live stream that modern technology couldn't crack wasn't difficult. It wasn't that Russell's technological prowess surpassed modern technology, it was just that combining it with Beyonder abilities amounted to a dimension-reducing blow to the modern era. Klein donned the alias of Dwayne to host the eerie live streams while using marionettes to stage various supernatural events. The two identities worked in tandem, and the mysterious nature of the stream room attracted significant attention in the modern era. Lynn had noticed that both Klein and Russell seemed to be using these streams to prepare people psychologically, helping them adapt more quickly to the harsh post-apocalyptic world. Although the initial awakening led to the destruction of the modern era, a considerable number of people survived. Many of these survivors, influenced by Beyonder characteristics, transformed into supernatural beings like giants, elves, and sanguine. Some absorbed characteristics without losing control, turning into gods, while the rest, who neither became Beyonder creatures nor absorbed characteristics, were the ancestors of the humans oppressed by the supernatural races in the Second Epoch. From that perspective, Klein and Russell's efforts weren't entirely in vain. Preparing people for the existence of monsters and understanding their characteristics could indeed help some survive in the cruel future world. But no matter what you change, you can't alter the outcome. Lynn muttered as he watched the live stream for a few minutes. Casually, he sent a, "next time, for sure," comment before excitedly calling Dwayne Dante, the host of the stream. Ring, ring, hello. Unsurprisingly, the call connected, and in the stream Dwayne pulled out his other phone. Of course, the audience was intrigued, and a flood of comments filled the screen. Someone's calling the host now. Could it be a friend of his? I bet it's another scammer. A scammer capable of pulling off this kind of production. I believe the host is a real Beyonder. Am I the only one who thinks this is all special effects? End of chapter. The netizens were arguing noisily. Some believed Dwayne's live broadcast was real, while others thought it was special effects. A few firmly insisted that Dwayne was a fraud. However, none of the comments in the chat seemed to affect Lynn and Klein's conversation. Dwayne, I've wrapped things up on my end. Do you need help over there? Inside the abandoned hospital, Klein, who was multitasking by controlling several marionettes, including one accompanying his family, heard his partner's cheerful voice over the phone. His mood was also lifted a bit. Klein knew well what Lynn and the Angel of Secrets had been busy with lately, and the phone call clearly meant the plan had succeeded. Great. This means my parents will be. Klein couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement inside. However, thanks to the clown's abilities, his expression remained calm as he smiled and said, "If Miller wants to come over, I certainly don't mind." While saying this, Klein also realized that his partner had probably finished his business and now wanted to join in on the live broadcast, helping to complete their goals. Naturally, Mr. Fool had no reason to reject such a convenient offer. Move over a bit, I'll open a portal and come right over. Once again, the cheerful voice of his partner came through the phone. Klein, understanding the cue, stepped aside. Immediately, a space portal appeared where he had just been standing, and Lynn hopped through. Hey, still broadcasting. Hello there, friends of the livestream. I'm Miller, Dwayne's partner. Lynn greeted enthusiastically, waving at the livestream camera. At that moment, the chat erupted once more. Whoa, a portal. That's got to be special effects, right? There's no way a space portal exists. Special effects, my ass. This is a live stream, and you're telling me these effects are that realistic. Who knows, maybe they do have that kind of tech. If they had that tech, why wouldn't they just make movies instead of doing live streams? Am I the only one who thinks Miller is really good looking? From now on, he's my new husband. How wasted are the people in this chat? The chat continued its heated arguments, shifting from whether the portal was real or fake, to whether Dawn was a fraud, to Miller's good looks and whether he was using some kind of beauty filter. As for Lynn and Klein, they obviously paid no attention to the chat's arguments. Lynn simply scanned the surroundings, noticing something. Stroking his chin, he said, an evil spirit. Likely the wraith of a Beyander from the death pathway that was left behind after they died. It's been bound to the hospital. Klein nodded. This time, the abandoned hospital wasn't a stage for him to perform, but a location where he had indeed detected the presence of a wraith and came to resolve the issue. Well then, let's go deal with it, Lynn said with a playful grin. He glanced at Klein and added suddenly, by the way, you haven't drunk any blood in a while, have you? Even for a duke, long periods without feeding can cause weakness. Need me to lend you some? Klein blinked, understanding that Lynn was teasing by playing into the persona of Russell's times Dwayne. He smiled and replied, thank you for your concern, dear Miller, but I think you might need the blood more than I do. Lynn chuckled in response, showing two sharp little fangs. Under the dim lights, his pale face looked even more striking and inhuman. The chat exploded again. Vampire Duke Dawn, Blood Hunter Miller, Demon Angel Merlin, Slender Ghost Gurman. Why are all your aliases these days Western styled? Does our own culture have no place? Inside a typical Chinese restaurant's private room, Russell flipped through the recording of the bizarre live broadcast while complaining. Seated around the round table were the members of this modern-era tour group. At this moment, it had been almost 3 months since the group first arrived in the modern era. Over those months, the strange live broadcast had gained quite a bit of fame. Russell and the others had also enjoyed their last period of peaceful time with family and friends. Now, with the moment of their final awakening approaching, the group had once again gathered. Well, the abilities of a mystical reenactment do seem more aligned with Western mysticism. Eastern supernatural beings, like paper figures or river gods, just don't feel like they fit, Lynn explained confidently, nudging Klein with his elbow. Besides, it turns out this path wasn't wrong to follow, right? Called out, Klein chuckled helplessly, though he remained in good spirits. After all, thanks to these 3 months of effort, with the help of countless netizens, his bizarro sorcerer potion had indeed been fully digested. Klein knew that once he returned to the 5th epoch, he could immediately ascend to the rank of Scholar of Yore. The ritual required the Beyander to be detached from reality for at least 300 years. Klein had slept in Saphira Castle for far more than 3,000 years. Though he had lived briefly after waking up, this short time wouldn't affect the Scholar of Yore ritual. Given your situation, you'll probably digest the Scholar of Yore potion quickly too, the Evernight goddess, who had been quietly ordering food, smiled and commented. Her gaze toward Klein was like someone admiring a flourishing cabbage. It might even digest as soon as you take it. Hiss, that's true. Not only do you have Mr. Dorr as a teacher, but you're also a being from the modern era. You have a natural advantage in digesting the potion. It really might dissolve instantly. Russell playfully gasped in mock shock. Scary, truly scary. Russell couldn't help recalling his own difficult journey at Sequence 3. As a former overpowered transmigrator, Russell's progress had indeed been smoother than most, but even so, it took him a long time to digest his Sequence 3 potion. And that didn't even account for the time spent on lower sequences. Looking at Klein now, the comparison was almost terrifying. No wonder Lynn chose you as the Lord of Mysteries. One's a game exploit, the other's a game exploiter. You two really are a perfect match, Russell teased. Klein coughed awkwardly, a bit embarrassed by the praise but unable to refute it. After all, whether it was in the history manipulated by Lynn or the destiny without Lynn, his journey to ascension had indeed been absurdly smooth. 3 years to ascend to godhood and becoming a great old one on the same day, Amon wouldn't even dare dream of something like that. End of chapter. Speaking of Amon. Lynn clearly noticed what Klein was thinking. He stroked his chin with interest and said, "Actually, I suspect that Amon has already infiltrated our ranks. Of course, I don't mean this era, but the fifth epoch." As soon as he said this, everyone looked at Lynn, while also giving a glance toward Klein. No one seemed worried about it, not even Adam, who merely frowned, showing a trace of helplessness in his gaze. Amon. Memories related to Amon flashed through Klein's mind, and his expression became subtle. Is he planning to abduct me? That's possible. Given the current situation, if he wants to make a move, his best option would be to target you. Lynn nodded, not blinking as he concealed the fact that Amon had already come close to Klein due to his deliberate inaction. As for why Lynn would allow this, the reason was simple. If Klein were in his normal state, Lynn would never have let him face Amon while still at Sequence 3. It would be meaningless. But the Klein before him had inherited part of the Fool's future legacy and had the ability to summon the future Lord of Mysteries. With Lynn by his side, there was every chance that they could turn the tables on Amon. It would also settle the grudge from the original story, where Klein was kidnapped. Moreover, this would help Amon realize sooner that meddling with them would be futile, especially with Saucerier's views on the matter and the presence of that rebellious little Amon. Lynn wasn't planning to annihilate him completely. Pressing this troublesome child into submission would be the best outcome. Lynn then turned toward Klein with excitement, asking, "So, what's your plan? Do you want us to deal with him, or will you face Amon yourself?" Klein seemed to fall into deep thought, absent-mindedly caressing the gemstone bracelet on his wrist. After a few seconds, he nodded firmly. "I want to try it myself. I want to personally break this fate." In the original Destiny, he was helplessly parasitized by Amon at Sequence 3 and had to escape through death. But now, although his personal strength still fell short of Amon's, with the historical projection of the Lord of Mysteries at his disposal, he felt it was worth a shot. In a sense, it would be like letting his future self avenge the kidnapping. And Klein glanced at the bigwigs around him and felt a sense of peace. The fool was not one to hesitate. When there was a thigh to hug, he wouldn't hesitate. "No problem. I'll have the Angel of Secrets back you up." Lynn gestured an "okay" sign. Just then, the food was served. The group quietly finished their meal, only to hear a rumbling sound outside, with faint flashes of white light in the sky. "Well, our journey ends here. I'll now lead everyone back." Lynn wiped his mouth, stood up, and looked at the group with various expressions. He sighed, "Let's go. This is beyond your control now, and it's beyond mine. Your family and friends are already waiting for you in Saphira Castle. Don't keep them waiting too long." In the face of the original creator's awakening, not even a Sequence 0 could do much. Even ancient beings of the Great Old One level could barely intervene. Not to mention, other than Lynn, the time-traveling travelers could change nothing. Even you can't change it. Adam, usually as quiet as air, finally spoke. Lynn looked at him and openly replied, "If I became him, I could change things. But the moment I become him, this fragile world will face a fate worse than the original's awakening." If it were possible, Lynn would, of course, want to prevent the awakening. Unfortunately, he simply couldn't. Adam didn't seem surprised by the answer. Lynn, unconcerned with Adam's reaction, looked at the others and said, "Let's go. The journey is over." Unlike the excitement and anticipation at the start of their journey, the mood on the return trip was somber. After all, in a way, they had once again witnessed the destruction of their home, powerless to stop it. The only comfort was knowing that their family and friends were safely asleep in cocoons at Saphira Castle. Upon returning to the fifth epoch, the first thing everyone wanted was for Klein to ascend to the gray fog and confirm whether the plan had worked, whether their family and friends had successfully arrived to this era. "I've confirmed it. They've indeed arrived. However, with my current control over Saphira Castle, I'm not yet able to release them. Klein opened his eyes after a brief journey to the gray fog and wasted no time in explaining, lifting the previously heavy mood. Even though they already knew the outcome, hearing that their loved ones had made it safely to this era finally brought a true sense of relief. Then you need to ascend to the Lord of Mysteries soon. Russell smiled and couldn't help but urge, haven't you already digested the Bizarro Sorcerer potion? Why not just advance to Scholar of Yore now? If you're missing something, just let us know. With so many of us, either King of Angels or Sequence 0, it'll be easy to gather the materials for a Sequence 3 potion. If Russell had originally viewed Klein's ascension as an investment in potential, now he was eager for Klein to become the Lord of Mysteries as soon as possible, so he could reunite with his loved ones. I have all the materials for the Scholar of Yore potion, the Evernight goddess spoke up. As the best cat caretaker in the original story, she had long prepared all the materials for the seer pathway up to the angel level. Even for Sequence 2 and Sequence 1, with Antigonus under her watch, she could likely obtain what was needed. If there's trouble during the promotion, I can help stabilize the situation, Adam said gently. As the strongest spectator, Adam had the ability to stabilize Klein's mental state during the ritual, greatly reducing the risk of losing control during the potion consumption. End of chapter. Upon hearing Adam's words, Lynn raised an eyebrow, inevitably recalling the people Adam had smuggled in, clearly not his parents or relatives. Whether they were Adam's friends remained unclear, but they were all intellectuals, some even conducting experiments in top-tier laboratories until they were dragged into the gray fog. Could they have been former colleagues of the ancient sun god? Or were they high-caliber talents carefully chosen by him? Lynn speculated inwardly while joining in on the conversation. With a smile, he said, Amon is currently wandering around Backland. Once you've advanced to Scholar of Yore, you can directly punch him to vent your frustrations. Sensing everyone's enthusiasm, Klein couldn't help but smile wryly. However, he didn't reject the idea outright. Wishing to bring down his family and friends from Saphira Castle as soon as possible, he nodded, I've already prepared the potion ingredients for Scholar of Yore, so I don't need any help with that. But if something unexpected happens during my advancement, I'll need to trouble Mr. Adam. Although confident in himself, being a cautious person, Klein didn't mind adding an extra layer of insurance. No problem. Adam nodded naturally. Unlike in the original timeline, where there was tension between Adam and Klein, the current timeline, disrupted by Lynn, had the two barely interacting. Aside from Adam silently observing Klein and the fool's daily antics, their paths rarely crossed. Thus, under the eager and expectant gazes of a group of Sequence Zeros and Kings of Angels, the fool asked Russell for help. Russell reverted the mystical item made from the Scholar of Yore's characteristic back to its original state. Then, Klein quickly prepared the auxiliary ingredients and mixed a cup of the Scholar of Yore potion. Without hesitation, he drank it in one gulp. That potion looks terribly unappetizing, Lynn commented, pinching his chin as he observed Klein's condition. Glancing at Adam, he suddenly asked, so, why does the Spectator Pathways potion taste good while most others are awful? Did the sun god sneak in some personal preferences when crafting these recipes? First, the first blasphemy slate wasn't created by the sun god, Adam replied calmly, accustomed to Lynn's odd thought processes. Second, it's not just the Spectator Pathway. The Wheel of Fortune Pathways potions also taste decent, and a few others have passable flavors. In other words, Lynn and Klein were just unlucky to have chosen pathways with unpleasant tasting potions. TCH, so you can be sarcastic too. Lynn didn't seem angry but rather looked at Adam as if he were some rare creature. I wasn't being sarcastic, just stating facts, Adam replied, glancing at Lynn. Though I won't deny I've picked up some habits. PFFT, just admit that Lynn has corrupted you. Russell burst out laughing, winking at Lynn. Anyone who can stay pure after hanging out with someone like him must be a saint or a fool. Lynn turned to Russell with a bright smile and said, Adam is fine with it because he's almost dead. Are you? Or are you eagerly awaiting social death? Russell's laughter abruptly stopped. He stared at Lynn like a rooster whose neck had been wrung, muttering after a while, just don't threaten me like that. Well, why don't you read your diary to Bernadette and teach her Chinese yourself? Lynn still smiled as he added, or would you prefer me to do it? Russell fell completely silent. Meanwhile, Klein successfully completed his advancement to Scholar of Yore. He opened his eyes with a somewhat complicated expression. What's wrong? Lynn asked. The scholar of your potion really melted in my mouth, Klein replied, unsure how to describe his feelings. Overall, though, he was pleased. It's probably because of the extra lessons from Mr. Dorr in my recent journey. The secret knowledge of the fourth epoch, as well as Klein's first-hand experience of the early revivals and the destruction of the modern era, had helped him digest the potion instantly. So, once we deal with Amon, we're heading to the forsaken land of the gods. Lynn's mood was just as upbeat, though he added regretfully, it's a shame Frank's mushrooms have only just started growing. All his hard work over the past 2 months feels wasted. Klein didn't disagree. Even without being forcibly taken to the Forsaken Land by Amon, he had planned to go there after advancing to Scholar of Yore to complete the Miracle Invoker's advancement ritual and to free the citizens of Silver City and Moon City. Klein thought for a moment, recalling fragments of memories from the future Fool. It's not entirely wasted. Even when the people of Silver City reach the outside world, there'll be a long period of resource shortage. Frank's mushrooms will ensure they have enough food in the beginning. As he spoke, his expression grew more nuanced. And for Frank, the research itself might be his biggest reward. Thinking of how, in the future, though Frank wouldn't destroy the world with mushrooms and fish, his title of Lord of Mushrooms would still resound throughout the 5 seas, Klein felt a headache coming on. Well, at least Catalya is watching over him. Lynn wasn't entirely confident in his response, deciding to leave the matter alone. Instead, he cheerfully said, so, do you need me to call Amon over, or will you go fishing yourself? Just remember, don't leave your marionette lying around, he'll track you. Cough. Klein understood Lynn's jab at how he had been caught by Amon in the original timeline due to his marionette. He lightly cleared his throat and said, I'll handle it myself. That afternoon, a postal worker named Amon, riding the latest model of bicycle, was slightly surprised when he spotted a wild Scholar of Yore marionette walking toward him. The marionette carried a faint aura of Saphira Castle. End of chapter.